What's up guys, assalamu alaikum, this is Purya. In this video I'm going to talk about loops, an inseparable part of any programming languages. We're going to talk about while and for loops at the beginning, then we're going to talk about how to use range, break, and continue. So without further ado, let's begin. So let's talk about while loop. While loop repeats a statement or a group of statements while a given condition is true. Let's see the structure. The structure of while loop is very simple. It says you use a keyword while, and after that you got a condition. If the condition, the output of condition is true or it is false, two options are going to be done. If it is true, the blocks of codes and statements you write, you code under the while line. The line that contains while, they're going to be executed unless the codes that immediately follow up the block will be executed. Let's see an example here. Consider you got a counter and it is set to 0. While counter is smaller than 10, just run this code, run the block. And one more thing, the block after while is indented. Almost all the blocks after any keyword are indented to make sure that they are part of this. For example, in here, this block is indented to show that these two lines belongs to this while statement. That these are part of this while. So counter at beginning is 0. 0 is smaller than 10. So simply these two lines are going to be executed. At the last line, the counter is incremented by 1. It becomes 1, and again 1 is smaller than 10. It goes on. Counter becomes 9. Counter is smaller than 10, so print it out. And incremented by 1, counter becomes 10. Whether 10 is smaller than 10 or not. No, 10 is not smaller than 10. So simply while breaks. As you can see, just counter colon 9 is printed out, and counter colon 10 is not printed out because this condition returns true for counter equals to 10, and the while loop breaks. This is how you simply can use while in some codes, in some part of your code that you want to do something while a condition is true. In that case, you simply use while. So let's talk about for loops. For loop iterates over items of a sequence data type or over an object which is iterable. We're going to talk about it in the following videos. Yeah, but let's consider that we've got a sequence variable, like for example here, our sequence data type is list. We've got a list of items. I want to iterate over the items, and for each item, we want to do, for example, some kind of stuff. We want to do some processing. We want to, I don't know, execute some codes in the simplest form. We want to print it out simply. So what do? We simply use for. We can use while as well, but it is definitely recommended to use for in these cases. What for does? This structure of for is like for variable in keyword, for keyword, variable in keyword, and the sequence data type, let me say iterable to make it as general as possible, and an indentation then for block. So what is this variable? Each time that for iterates, whenever the code, the kernel reaches here in this section that for starts, it knows that this should be a sequence data type or in general an iterable. It takes the first item from this list. The first item is Muhammad, and it is assigned to name. When it is assigned to name, it says, it executes the rest of the code while the name is assigned to the first item. In the next iteration, it it takes the second item, it assigns it to name. Again, name is equivalent to variable here. It's a variable. It's really a variable, and you can name it whatever you want. Its name could be name, variable, whatsoever, whatever. Like usual variables that we use in Python, you can define in Python. You can define the variable of 4 with whatever name that you like. Here, because we've got a list of names, I realized that its name should be name. It is more convenient. When you see it, you realize, okay, it means that the names of the items are taken from a list of names. So what do? The block simply prints out the name. So let me run it. As you can see, at first iteration, it says it prints Muhammad. At second iteration, it prints Jawad, and the third iteration, the name is equal to Puya and prints out Puya. So whenever it reaches the end of the list, the end of the iterable, it could be a tuple, it could be a string, or whatsoever, that is iterable. I mean, 4 can iterate over it. And whenever it reaches the end, it simply stops it, it breaks it. This is how for loops stop. So let's see another example that is using a string. As you can see, or variable that we want to iterate over it is str with underline, which is a string, hello world, and the variable name here is ch. It says, for example, character, because each time we're going to get a character from this string. And as you can see, the character is, for example, the first time is HELLO, even the space is taken from this sequence data type. And each time it is taken, and whenever it reaches D, and after D there are no items in this input for the for, and it simply breaks or stops. This is how we can use for. They are very convenient to work whenever you want to do an iterative process over items of a list, tuple, or an iterable in general. So let's talk about a task here. Consider you want to print out your name in backward order. You want to print it out from the end. Consider my name is Puya, so I created a variable called name, and I assigned Puya to it. As you remember, we said if you want to reverse a list, a tuple, using this slice functionality that we talked in previous videos, you can use this fancy way while setting its step to -1. It simply starts from the end. Let me check it out. So one important thing to remember here, whatever you do on your variable is not going to be done inside for, okay? For really does not care what is this. The for simply works with the output of this. So what does it mean? Consider here the same code. I have simplified it by creating another variable, okay, reverse name, and I have taken this part and I have assigned it to this reverse name, and I have given the reverse name to for loop here. And as you can see, the outputs are the same, okay? Whenever you see a line of code, a statement here that seems to, even a function that returns a list or iterable, if you really think that is complicated, simply you can take it and assign it to another variable. This way you can simplify it, and that way you can trace the code easily. So if you find this section of your for loop complicated in some codes and you don't know how to break it down, just try to create as many intermediary variables as possible. It could really help you to break down the code and understand what is going on. So let's talk about another task here. What does it say? Okay, this is another way of coding. It simply says prints the whole list, or sorry, it should be names, whole list of items that you got equal to the number of items inside of it. Okay, let me break it down. Whenever you see underline in this section, in this part of the for loop, the variable name is changed and it is underlined here. Most of the time, by convention, when a coder, a Python programmer, instead of defining a name with characters, like for example, name, names, or ch that we got here, or name that we got here, he or her decides to put an underline here, it means that the guy does not care about the items that is going to be taken from that iterable object that we got, from that list, from that tuple or string. He simply wants to execute this block of code to the number of items which are inside names. We know that for loop gets the first item, second item, third item until it ends. So simply it is taking the number of items. It is iterating as number of items inside of this inside of its input. So simply, whenever you see underline, realize that the guy does not care about the items inside of the input of this for loop. He just wants to he care about the number of iterations. In here, for example, we want to iterate this list of names 3 times because, as you can see, we've got 3 items. So we simply wanted to iterate it as long as this item is, this variable is, and as you can see, this variable contains 3 items. So we're going to print it three times, and the underline is not used at all. So yeah, I told you it is by convention most of the time. Maybe you find someone that, for example, codes like this. I haven't seen it before. It is possible, but definitely it is not recommended at all. So whenever you see underline, remember that most of the times it means they want to convey the message that I don't care about the items. I'm using for because I want to iterate as long as the items that are inside this name. So let's talk about range. So what is a range? If you're familiar with other programming languages, you have definitely seen like for I equals to 0, I plus plus, I smaller, for example, like 10, 20, whatever that is defined there. So as you can see, we don't have the same functionality here in Python by default. We can take items from a iterable object, from a list, from a string, and we can process over it. But to mimic the same functionality that other programmers have in different programming languages, the range is invented by Python developers. I don't know when it was added to Python, maybe from the beginning. I really don't remember. So what does it do? It exactly creates the same number of indexes that we are looking like other programming languages. Let's see some examples. It illustrates better than me talking. So for example, here, when I say range 10, it simply says that I'm going to create a range of items from 0, range of numbers, not items, numbers. Numbers are in integer, their types are integers. So I'm going to create, the range says, I'm going to create a range of numbers from 0 to 10. So as you can see, it's not very intuitive. What does it say? Let's apply list. I will explain why applying a list. Using this list, we're going to just simply convert a range to a list of numbers. It is more easier to understand. It is more intuitive. So it is easier to understand. So as you can see, it says 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like other stuff that we talked about. The range, it simply does not include the last number. You can specify the starting point As you can see here, you can specify to start from 0, to start from 1. If you don't specify the first number, it starts from 0. The understanding is like the range kind of tries to create a range of indexes for us. Okay, that's why by default it starts from 0, because the indexes of a list or whatever that except indexing is 0. The starting point is 0. You can specify a starting point. As you can see here, it starts from 0. Again, the endpoint is not included, it is excluded. And like any indexing method, you can define the step. Here, for example, the step is 2. It says simply, okay, start from 1 and before 10, and start from 1 ended before 10, but and your step should be 2. So as you can see, it jumps each 2 number. Here, for example, it jumps the 2 here because the step is 2. So for example, the starting point is 1, so it is incremented by the step, which is 2, so it goes to 3 and go on until it reaches 9, and after 9 it is 11. 11 is larger than 10, so it doesn't include 11 as well. So let's see how we can use range in a for loop and how the exact functionality of it. Here, as you can see, counter in range 1 till 10 with a step of 2. As you can see, this group of numbers which are here are printed out here. So how really range works? Consider that we got a huge list of numbers, for example, 10,000 items there are in a list, or even more, 1 billion numbers are inside of a list or tuple, whatever. If you create a range for that, for example, using list, you have to, if you want the access to indexes, what you do, for example, you start from 0, 1, 2 until 1 billion. Okay, it occupies a big chunk of your RAM. So for example, your code is going to require, for example, a very strong RAM and hardware. It is not efficient. What does range says? Range says, okay, you want to start from 0 and go up until, for example, 10,100 or so on. Okay, whenever for calls me, okay, what is the starting point? If it's the first time, okay, I'm gonna return 1. Okay, if it calls me for the second time, I'm gonna increment it with 2, and I'm gonna return it simply. I'm gonna return 3 for the next time. So just pause here. At the next time, it returns 3. Do we need 1 or the starting point? Or for example, the third time the range returns 5. So for range to have a great functionality, does it really need 3 and 1? No, really, it doesn't need 3 and 1. It just simply needs to remember the step number and just when it has to stop it. So exactly, range works like this, and it really occupies a little chunk of RAM, and it doesn't matter from where it starts and from where it stops. It simply just I think remembers 3 numbers, saves 3 numbers, like its current state, where it has to stop, and what is the step. This makes it very, very super efficient. So that's why when you print out range, it says I'm just simply a range from 0 to 10, and it doesn't return the number because it does not create. It is not going to give you a list. In that case, it is not efficient. It is not meant to do this. Just simply, it is a way to create a range of indexes. So it's better to save just this, its current state, the endpoint, and the step. So let's see how we can use it. For example, consider that you have two lists of items and you want to save them element-wise. So, for example, you want to save the first item of list 1 with the first item of list 2. So, in this case, you can use len to get the range, to get the number of items which are inside the list 1. It is definitely 4 items, so it simply says it simply is equal to 4, and range of 4 means it is going to iterate over 0, 1, 2, 3, the number of indexes 0, 1, 2, 3, and each time these indexes are going to be assigned to I, and using I we can access to the items, the first item of first list and this first item of the second list, and we simply add them up and append them to a range. And here is the output. As you can see, minus 10 plus 5 is equal to minus 5, and the rest goes on the same way. So this is one way we can use range, and this is not recommended. This is a way we can use range, but this is not recommended. I put it here so you can see an example how we can use range and get familiar with different types, but definitely it's not recommended. Consider you want to print this list backward. We talked about how we can make backward, make lists and, for example, tuples backward. Here it simply says we want to do the same thing using range, and here, as you can see, the starting point should be the last index. Here the last index is 3, where we get the length of this list. It is 4 by default, the number of items. So we cannot start from 4 because it returns index error, because there is no index 4 here. So we have to subtract it with 1, so it becomes this it comes down to 3, the last number, and we say stop it at minus 1, because before minus 1 we got 0 minus 1, so we want that 0 to be included but minus 1 not included. So we say okay, start from 0, come down to start from 3, come down to minus 1 with a step of minus 1. It means like to start from 3, minus it with subtract it with 1, it becomes 2, 1, 0, and print the items from and get the items from the list and print them out. As you can see, 12, 10, and so on. Definitely it's not recommended, because I showed you a way to reverse a list or a sequence type, no matter what it is. Here is it is a string. You can do the same for list as well. So this is not recommended, but we put it here so it's a good way to understand how stuff works. To use them in an unusual way always helps. So again, not recommended. So what is it about? Oh, very important thing. When you want to access the exact items of a list, of a string, of an iterable, don't, for example, create a range for it and access to the items using their indexes, because Python simply allows us to remove this boilerplate and simply access the items directly. As you can see, we can simply access the item directly, and therefore it is not recommended to access them using their indexes. Yeah, as you can see, it is much simpler than this block of code, and I personally prefer this way instead of using range to just access the indexes. And again, using the access indexes, you want to access the items which you could do it directly. I mean, here you could directly access the items. So if you're from other programming languages, this is definitely, most of the times you may want to start like this because it feels more natural to you, but in Python, this is the Pythonic way to access the items of a list or an iterable. So, let's talk about break keyword or statement. Okay, let me change it to keyword. So this is more general. So, what does break do? Consider you got a block of code, and in some point you simply want to break your loop. You know that if you continue your loop, I don't know, maybe an error is going to be raised, or some part of, for example, your database is going to be modified, or some code is going to be executed that you don't want it to happen. Okay, in that case, you can use break. What break does? It simply breaks the preceding loop uh, before it, the exact preceding loop. You may have several nested loops. We're going to see them in the future videos. The break simply breaks the first preceding uh, loop before it. Here, for example, consider we got a code. It says while true. Okay, you may see while true a lot. It simply says that the condition is true. As we talked about, uh, conditions return true or false. Okay, true. They may return true or false. So there is nothing wrong with just putting a true here. It just simply said it's true. Yeah, it means the condition is true and the while is going to be executed forever because its condition is true by default and it's not going to change. So in these cases, we definitely need a break because that way it's going to run, it's going to be executed forever. So print counter counter, it prints the counter, it increments the counter, and it simply says if counter is bigger, is larger or equal to 10, simply break the loop. I don't know, maybe for example, you don't want to execute the code for numbers larger than 10 for whatever reason. It's up to you. The code requirements, for example, the task requirements asks you, for example, to break the code after it reaches 10. So as you can hear, it's simply counter. When counter reaches 10, it says if counter is larger or equal to 10. So, okay, it is equal to 10. It prints out this warning or whatever information. It says, okay, I'm going to break the code, for example, says, okay, breaking the while loop, and it breaks. And when breaks happens, the exact code, the immediate code that follows the while, the loop, doesn't matter while or for loop, is going to be executed, the exact and immediate code after it. And we know from in session in indentation that the exact code starts without indentation. This block of code, all of them have indentation. This if loop, this if condition has its own indentation. So when breaks happen, the first line of code after while that does not have the indentation is going to be executed. As you can see, the blocks of code in while loop has their own, and the blocks of code in while loop have their own indentation. The exact one that does not have indentation, these lines have indentation, but this one does not. So it simply means that this print function does not belong to while. So it is going to be executed after break is triggered. As you can see here, this is where it is executed. So how we can use break in for? This is exactly the same way that we used it in while loop. For example, here it says for counter in range 1000. It means it's going to start from 0 to 999. If counter is larger than is larger or equal than 10, simply break it. And as you can see, the output is the same from 0 to 10, and it breaks when it reaches 10. That's it for break. So let's talk about continue keyword. Continue keyword is kind of like break. It says it doesn't execute the remaining code that follows it, but it doesn't break the loop for just it doesn't break it all. It simply skips, if it is triggered, it simply skips the code that follows it, and it starts a new iteration. Okay, I mean not a new iteration. The next iteration is the correct way to say it. It starts the next iteration, but it doesn't stop the loop like break does. So let's see an example to illustrate this matter. Here, counter starts from 0 to 9, including 9 or excluding 10. It simply says whenever a counter is equal to 5, continue. The continue keyword is triggered. It simply says, okay, for whatever reason, you don't want to print out 5, or you don't want to do your processing on whenever the counter is equal to 5, but you want to do the rest. Okay, if we had put a break here, the code would have stopped here. It wouldn't like continued. It wouldn't have continued printing, for example, 6, 7, 8, 9. But continue simply says, I want to continue a portion of code, but it's okay, just do the rest. So as you can see, the continue statement keyword. I think both are great, but to be aligned with the rest of the code, the rest of the notebook, I change it to continue the keyword. So the continue keyword is executed. So this print or this block is not executed for counter equals to 5. And as you can see, we don't have counter equal to 5. The same goes on for, the same rule applies to while as well. For example, here, as you can see, counter is 0. The counter at the beginning, it is 0. Is it smaller than 10? Yes, it is smaller than 10. So counter is incremented by 1. And this if statement says what is the remainder, what is the module of counter divided, if the module of counter divided by 2 is equal to 1, so continue it. It simply means we're not going to print odd numbers. We're just going to print even numbers, because we know that the module of even numbers by 2 divided by 2 is equal to 0, while the same equation for odd numbers is equal to 1. So here, whenever it is odd, the counter is equal to an odd number that is definitely smaller than 10. The code is executed, which means that this print statement is not going to be executed for it. And as you can see, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 are executed, but not the odd ones. So that's it for this video. This was a long video, 33 minutes. So simply please subscribe to the channel and click on the bell button so you will be notified of the future videos. And I encourage you guys to introduce my videos to your friends so they can benefit from these videos as well. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.